doing today?
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to project more excitement because of how cold it is and it's still snowing outside. But I am excited to see you. How are you doing?
My goodness, you are incredibly excited. And I see you over there with your shoulders out in this single digit degree weather.
It's hilarious. I was talking to a friend this morning. I was like, I'm freezing cold. It's 74 degrees inside of my apartment, but I'm freezing cold. And she goes, well, what are you wearing? Because most people would be put on some sweatpants if they're cold or a jacket. I'm over there like, where's my fireplace button? Where's my heater? I was like, I guess I could put on layers. That might help, huh?
Yeah, I am not turning my thermostat up. It's not happening. I refuse. So I just put on more clothing.
Not mad at you about that. Not mad at you about that. First and foremost, we want to welcome everybody to What's Up, Doc, which is a segment that we put together last year because we were getting emails from leaders that just didn't want to be known. So every question that comes in is completely anonymous. And Dr. Price has a superpower. I don't know how, but she has the superpower to be able to answer just about any question on the spot and give a very good answer. So, Dr. Price, are you ready to use your superpower on us?
I am ready to use my superpower. Look, you say what is it? Answer any question on the spot. Disclaimer, if I have no idea what the answer is, I will say that. Sometimes people ask stuff I don't know about.
Well, I know that you will probably have the answer to these, but I do look forward to how you like to tie in empathy when it comes to leadership. So the first question that I have, it says, Dear Dr. Price, I manage a team that has been working nonstop due to a surge in demand. Corporate is pushing mandatory overtime and weekend work to keep up with the orders, but I see the toll that it's taking on my team. They're exhausted and morale is at an all-time low. So I've been encouraging them to sign off and to take mental health days and to skip non-essential meetings, even if that means we miss a deadline here or there. Now, my boss says that I'm undermining productivity and I'm not being a team player. I feel like I'm standing up for my people, but am I wrong for protecting them at the expense of the company's goals?
Oh gosh, this one's kind of tough, right? I don't know how long this has been going on. Like, how long have people been working under these conditions? I do know that in the manufacturing environment I worked in, there were certain times of the year where we would need all hands on deck. So I think many of you know that I worked at Hallmark Cards as a chemical engineer for a while. And there would be times, not when you would expect. So we would be working on Christmas in the middle of summer, but we had to meet those deadlines in order to be able to get things in the warehouse. And so therefore, during that time, people would be working 7 days a week, 3 shift operation. And it was one of those things that was kind of expected, but also we knew that that was not our norm. And so I don't know if you have any control over this or not. You probably don't. But I would want to look at how long is this going to go on, and is there an end in sight? If there is an end in sight, I would be talking with my folks about how you just give me that last minute push. So some of you know that I'm also a Chiefs fan. I can't get out of my mind this one time when Chris Jones was just exhausted. In fact, it was not this Super Bowl season, it was last Super Bowl season. He was exhausted. And Andy Reid was like, I just need you to go in there one more time. People need to know that the ridiculousness that is always grinding, that there's an end to that. So that's number one. What's the end, and how are you communicating that if you know when it is? If there is no end and we're supposed to be operating like this all the time, I'm out, because, you know, time's up for organizations being understaffed. I understand running lean. I don't understand being understaffed. This situation where we have a system of unchecked capitalism, I'm actually wondering what kind of toll it's taking on your life. Forget what it's doing to your people. What's it doing to your life as a leader? And I want you to be able to demonstrate and model for people what good looks like, because you are not always working around the clock 7 days a week. So that's number one. Number two, I would say if you can take a moment to step aside and pull people together in a room and ask them. And I know when you're busy, this feels like it's not the best thing to do, but I want you to pull everybody together for about 2 hours, and I want you to have them look at how you can meet the demands of what needs to happen with the staff you have, and ask people to share all their best ideas. Now, there'll be some personalities on your team that are not, they don't particularly enjoy brainstorming. Uh, They don't, everybody doesn't have to participate, but everybody has to be there because I think it brings up innovative ideas to have a diverse group of people in the room, but have everyone share their best ideas and then go through the list and say which of these are in our control and which ones are not. And the things that are in your control, then start divvying up how you can start to implement some of those things so that people can make it through this period of time. So those would be my main suggestions.
Dr. Price, this isn't part of the question, but I like to throw it out there because I do know that a lot of not just our clients, but there are a lot of people that are in this middle manager position, right? Where they have to communicate up and communicate down.
Oh.
What would it be some good advice when you are a manager that you're in that position on how to communicate better up and how to communicate better down when you're kind of stuck in the middle on how you have to communicate with both groups?
Yeah, I think leading from the middle is one of the hardest spots to be in, quite frankly, because we have to we often forget to switch roles. So here's what I mean: communicating down. Um, it is my I need to be in alignment with the organization. Like when you take on a leadership role, you lose a little bit of the right to your own opinion when you're communicating down. And so the worst thing that we could ever do is to be communicating down in a way that suggests that we disagree with the direction the organization is going. Because quite frankly, if you disagree with the direction the organization is going, you probably shouldn't be leading in this organization, right? Alignment means that we're all kind of tracking along the same way. However, when we're communicating up, too often middle managers lose their courage, which is to communicate like, look, these are the resources, this is the talent, this is the skill I have, here's what you're asking for, and I can or can't make that happen. Instead, sometimes we just be silent, and then that rolls down to our people because we are not being silent. So I think the most important thing is to remember is that your first team is your team of peers.
Mm.
Second team, when you're in the middle, are the people who report to you, and if you forget that, you're gonna find yourself in a troublesome spot.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Our next leader that sent in a question says, Dr. Price, I have a top performer on my team who consistently exceeds targets, but they have a reputation for being condescending and rude to their coworkers. I've received multiple complaints, and it's clear that their behavior is damaging to morale. I want to address it, but senior leadership keeps telling me as long as they continue to produce, let's just let it slide. I'm considering putting them on performance plan that could lead to termination if they don't change. But am I wrong for risking the team's results for the sake of the company culture?
Yeah, I think this ties into a project I'm working on right now called the correct paradox. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And too often we treat that as a binary choice when you can be right and effective. And in this case, what I hear is you've got a brilliant leader, exceptional at their job, but they are creating all kinds of disturbances because of the how.
Mhm.
So I've got two things. One, I want to know what are the values? What's the mission of your organization and what are the values? And when you consider the values of this organization, is this person in alignment with the values? And if not, do their objectives match the values of the organization? Because I've learned since I've been a consultant that many leaders will not put in the objectives things like showing up with emotional intelligence or demonstrating teamwork and defining what that means. And it should be an objective if you are rating people against it. And it sounds like this person is being rated against it. He, she, or they is not meeting this objective, but you get what you measure. It should be in the performance objectives. And so first I would say check and see what the values are of the organization. Once you know what the values of the organization are, is this person in alignment or out of alignment? If they're out of alignment, this is easy. This is now part of their annual objectives. You are measuring them against those objectives. If they're meeting them, wonderful. If they're not, now we have a performance improvement conversation we need to have. It's like too often we talk more about people than we do to people, and we expect that they're going to change. Formalizing it in the way of an objective setting actually is part of what the solution is. You know, you don't get to, just because you're smart does not mean that you get to be damaging and rude to other people. That's not what that means. And if we allow it, then we are basically saying that it is okay. And I think do your part in making sure that all of your decisions are in alignment with value systems, and then hold this person accountable to the objectives as they set. One last thing I'll ask is, I don't know how long this person's been working for your organization, but I used to keep track of what people said in their interview. And so let's say today they engage in, talking to someone negatively. Have a quick conversation, set a meeting and say, if I were to ask you about this same scenario when I were interviewing you for this job, is this how you would have responded? And listen to what they say, and that should give you the answer that you need in order to move forward. Now, most people who are worth keeping on teams are the kinds of people who would say, actually, no, I wouldn't have said that in my interview. Here's how I would have handled it if this were an interview. And then that's what you hold me accountable to, how I would have behaved in my interview. That's a good question.
I love it, Dr. Price. I love it. Um, this one question is actually asking for advice regarding transitioning from being virtual to going in person.
Okay.
So it says, Dear Dr. Price, as you may know, the government is mandating a full return to office for all governmental employees. But my team has been thriving remotely. Productivity is high, engagement scores are up, and we've hit all of our targets. My team is overwhelming with the fact that we have to return, citing that there's going to be childcare issues, longer commutes. We have people that don't even live in the state anymore. We don't know what to do, but I'm also trying to figure out, how do I allow morale to continue to grow when all of the changes are coming down? We can't seem to keep up with the changes that come out every single day. But with this as well, how do I make it fair for employees who don't even live in the state to not be at work?
Yeah. These are unprecedented times for sure. And I'm going to be a little more measured in my response than I typically am, because I am also learning with you. And when I'm learning, the primary feeling that I have is frustration.
Mhm.
And I know that about myself. And so I'm just being a little more careful, if you can pick up on that. I don't want you to think I'm skirting the issue as much as I am just being careful, because I know that my level of frustration is high. First things first, trying to be responsive to a flurry of activity coming out of the executive branch of the government every day is almost impossible. In order to be responsive and not reactive, I want you to first embrace this idea that I'm not going to respond to every single executive order immediately. I'm going to read it, try to understand what it means, and not take any action for the first 24, 48 hours. The reason I'm saying that is because I've been watching my clients over the last 3 weeks make massive changes, communicate, and then just have to just reel all of that back when something gets blocked either by Congress or by just legislative action in some other way. So, one, just try to have a sense of measured gravitas instead of being reactive right now. The last thing you want to do is add a level of distraction and a lack of focus to your people. So, as best you can, protect folks from that. With that being said, I believe that it is well within your responsibilities to send communication back to say, here's the situation for my team members, right? I've got 10 team members. 5 of them live in the state. 4 of them do not. One of them has childcare issues that are going to be a problem for the next 6 months. Given that, here's the plan that I've put forth, my 9-month plan to bring my team back in office. I don't know if you have the capability to do that, but that's what I mean when I say that sometimes our role when we're communicating up is not to just say yes. Yeah, I don't want to be resistant. Nobody likes to work for someone who's resistant. But when you do have the ability to just when it doesn't make sense, what you just described to me is something that does not make logical sense. Your team's getting good outcomes, and you're going to have a talent shortage if you force everyone back in the office. That has to be communicated back up. Now, I am not the kind of leader who just wants someone bringing a problem to me. So I think pull your team together and say, okay, in the next 6 to 9 months, how can we meet this mandate? Here's a possible draft option for what we would be able to do. Because Jocelyn, you know that we know of organizations that don't even have a physical facility anymore, and
Mhm.
people are running around trying to find a physical facility. I just, I don't know. I just think it's important to communicate back because it sounds like some decisions are being made, and there's a level of ignorance that is occurring, and I mean that in the actual definition of the word, like firing people who are responsible for national defense and then having to rehire them the very next day. That means that there's information that has to be communicated back the other way. So I would pull my team together, again, brainstorm solutions and possible options for what we can do to meet the goal, if at all. And then I would communicate my draft plan back up and then allow somebody to tell me that my draft plan is unacceptable. I wouldn't just take something illogical and go, "Oh, I have to do that." That's not really leadership to me. That is a person who takes orders, and I imagine that that's not what you're being paid to do, to just take orders. I bet you're being paid to also think and provide thought leadership on what's the best way to lead your teams, and I would offer some of that communication back. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Price. And I'm going to tell you guys, I promise that she has not heard this next question. It's just not, it
I
just
haven't
ties
heard
into
any.
what she's just was talking about. But it says, Dr. Price, I've read several of your books. Right now, I work for an organization that strictly depends on government funding and or us getting grants. We're currently facing a rough quarter. Leadership has ordered me to cut 10% of my team to reduce expenses. Before doing this, I decided to bring my team into a room and ask them what are ways that we can just trim the budget. Thoughts came up like cutting consultants, freezing bonuses, and pausing non essential projects. That would save everyone's job. I thought that this was a great idea, so I took it to my boss. Still, my boss insists on layoffs because it's just the industry standard. And that's what optics are when it comes to savings. How can I go back to my team, or how should I fight for them and push back? Because I don't feel like I'm wrong standing up for my team against the company.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand this right. So, this leader pulled their team together and actually came up with suggestions for how they can meet the budget reduction. And what they got met back with is you still need to cut people.
Yes.
This is a hard one. I've actually not run into something like this before, but I think it's worth a conversation. Like I think too often we cut bait, and my first thought is to cut bait. Like that truly, that's my first thought. Like, why are you even working here? That's my if I'm just being honest about how I feel, like why would you even be working for someone who feels this way? There's a practice called active listening, and I want you to schedule a meeting with your boss, and I want you to be ready to practice this. I heard your goal is to reduce the budget by X. I have reduced the budget by X. And now I hear you saying that the goal is different. And listen and take responses, right? Like, am I hearing you that the goal is not reducing the budget by X? that the goal is actually to cut people. And then I want you to have the courage to stay in conversation, not thinking of them as an illogical, unreasonable, unempathetic, not compassionate jerk, because that's kind of where my frame originally goes. But to think about them as a person who just is concerned about their job and really doesn't want to have the don't doesn't want to spend the time working on this because it does take more time. Find out what their fear is. Use a concept called tactical empathy, where you try to truly get into their shoes and understand their position. And then going way back to Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, seek to understand, then to be understood. Because from understanding your boss, now we can maybe find a more middle ground. Because here's what I'm concerned about. If you just take a position of just doing what they say, or just thinking that they're ridiculous and not doing what they say, you run the risk of losing your job and putting everybody else's job in jeopardy as well. And so let's use our empathy muscle and our communication strategies and make sure you're super clear on what the goal is. Because if I heard correctly, the goal was to reduce the budget and you were able to do that.
Mhm.
Um, are they concerned about next year's budget and your ability to do it again? I'm not sure, but I think that's the conversation that needs to be had.
I like that answer, Dr. Price, because sometimes we can just jump to assumptions.
Yeah.
Like, my boss thinks it might just be easier just to cut 10 or 10% of of the employees, and they're not thinking about even the aftermath of where's that 10% of that workload going to go to, where are we shifting it, and what is it going to cost us in the long run if by just doing that, or even just considering, like, you threw all these options out of cutting the consultants, cutting bonuses freeze. What is that going to do to morale? So I think it does require a deeper conversations, because I think this person's team came up with some great solutions that they were like, you know what, I will forego a bonus to ensure that I still have a job, and my coworkers would. And so I absolutely love your recommendation. And the last question I have for you, Dr. Price, how do you, or what would you say to someone who's in a leadership position who is struggling to be courageous right now?
Yeah, I feel like I need to dust off the session description about having courage in leadership, because especially living in the Midwest, people don't like to be uncomfortable. Discomfort feels like it's not nice. Discomfort feels like it's not safe. Discomfort feels like it's wrong. And quite frankly, when you're having to be courageous, you're doing so from a place of discomfort, from a place of fear. Like, if you don't feel uncomfortable, if you don't feel fear, you're not being courageous. Like that, like, courage means doing something that you are fearful of doing. And so I think more often than not, what I have to help build capacity in people is the ability to sit with this discomfort, recognize what you feel in your stomach, what you feel in your hands, and do the somatic empathy practices to be able to then push past that feeling and still do the right thing. I am seeing and having so many conversations with people who are making choices and being silent when they know they should speak up about something because it's the discomfort they are afraid of. And I'm never going to suggest that somebody put their own family at risk. I'm never going to suggest that someone put their own bodies at risk. I don't know how much I am willing to do that myself. But what I will say is this: you have a list of values, 3 to 5, I hope, that you live by every single day. Mine are super clear: humor, justice, and competence. And if I say justice is important to me, then when it's the violation of justice, that's the thing I need to stand up for, even
Mhm.
if it's uncomfortable, right? If and when somebody is incompetent, that's the thing I need to stand up for, even when it's uncomfortable. And so, first things first, be super clear about what you value and There are a lot of things that are just kind of non-negotiables that I don't need to mention for myself, but everybody needs to know what they are for themselves. But then the three non-negotiables, the things that you just have guide you every single day. You don't have to be courageous about everything, but I'm gonna need you to be courageous about those. And
Yeah.
it means doing it scared, it means feeling uncomfortable, it means that sometimes people are not gonna like you. And from a person who's a serial, like, wanting everybody to be my friend, I know how difficult it is what I'm saying. Um, but that's what leadership is. And I will ask every person who's listening to this today, if by chance someone were to ask you how you would show up and it was your interview, don't be the thing that my grandmother used to say, "A no backbone having jellyfish." Like, right? Like, we've got to stand up for the things we know to be right. And I don't mean be righteous,
Mhm.
not righteous. Um, but there are some things that are absolutely non-negotiables, and we know that we know them to be right. We have to live in accordance with our own values. We have to hold these organizations to the things they say they value. And in the overlap, that's how you know you're in the right place. So hopefully that's a good answer to your question.
It was a great answer to my question. I told you have this superpower that I absolutely love because
I'm
you
pretty
have
I'm pretty
answers.
passionate about that courage thing.
Yeah, we talk about it often. We do talk about it often, and we just want to we want to encourage our listeners to be courageous. With that being said, Dr. Price, that was our very last question. But I do want to just tell our listeners that Dr. Price has a virtual session coming up on Monday. So registration ends this Thursday, and it's unleashing your leadership, or Leadership Unleashed is the actual name. And do you want to talk just a little bit about that, Dr. Price, and we can get off?
Yeah, so unleashing your leadership is truly about understanding who you are as a leader. Um, the walk away with tool that you have is a personal development plan that shares just very deeply who you are, how you think about change, decision making, conflict, and how you like to communicate. But it also has some small things you can do to be more effective with more people more often. And that's the best part of this particular assessment. Usually, when I'm doing this event with teams or intact work teams, it's around $10,000 for the investment. But we're offering it as a public session for 99 bucks. So it's legitimately 10% of the total cost of what it would be if you were, doing it with your whole team. And so I hope that you can sign up and do it. Let's see, where can they find out more about that? It's livelyparadox.com.
Livelyparadox.com and go to our events page. It's actually the first event that's listed. And if you click on that, you'll find all the information. Or if you'd like to send an email because you are like, I want to get my team on there, send me an email at jocelyn@livelyparadox.com and I can shoot over an invoice and get you and your team signed up and registered before Thursday.
Whatever makes it most convenient. And Lucretia, so nice to have you today. You were so involved. So thank you so much. It was good to have you all. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.